Hey, what's going on, guys? My name's Jesus Barron. Welcome to Lead and Bacon Podcast. So today is going to be a good episode. It was supposed to be a different episode, episode 7, but I've decided to change it. So today's episode is going to be for being prepared for things such as war in the home front, terrorist attacks, or pretty much any situation that involves having to protect yourself and your family here. So originally it was supposed to be a religious podcast. It was going to be titled The Third Temple, but I decided because of the times and the possibility of war, that is, I'm going to change it. Why? Because I care about people. I care about people being ready, and I hope and I pray that whatever I tell you can serve as a tip or as a guide so that you and your family could be better prepared. Now, let's start with what's going on right now. Right now, the war in Israel with Hamas, the terrorist group, it's looking like it's still pretty high tense, right? It's high tense situation. The possibility of other adversaries getting involved is pretty high. We're talking adversaries like Iran. We're talking about Hezbollah as far as a terrorist organization get involved over in Lebanon. So it's a scary situation because it can lead into World War III. How can it lead into World War III? Well, if Iran gets involved, the U.S. has to get involved. If the U.S. gets involved with Iran, China and Russia could very well get involved. Why? Because China and Russia are allies with Iran. Now, if the United States gets involved and China gets involved and Russia gets involved, then by default, all the NATO countries have to get involved to protect the United States per the treaty. Now, we're hoping it never gets to that. But since the possibility and the opportunity exists, it's good for people to be prepared and understand that you have to be ready for the worst case scenario. You never want to prepare for the best case scenario because that would be right now, right? So what is the worst case scenario? Well, it's hard to tell, but the best thing you can do is prepare yourself for things such as a home attack. We're talking cell groups, terrorist attack. I would even dare to say martial law, because if it came down to that, there would be martial law. So you would have to make sure you had all the things you need for your home. We're talking food, water, weapons, medicine, first aid, fuel, electricity. So there's a lot that's involved. There's a lot that's involved to that. So the first thing we have to do is fight the stigma. One of the biggest stigmas that we have here in the United States, or the ideas that we have here in the United States, that there is no way something like that can come to our home front. And the reality is, because of the modernization of our enemies and cyber attacks, unsecured border, and just how sophisticated everything's become, not only that, but the propaganda level that's increased here in the United States, which has, as you guys have seen, created sympathizers for their cause. The possibility of terrorist attacks here in the United States is high. The possibility of having terrorist attacks here is high. So it's important to always be ready. Now, if you're an advocate for having, a firearm, a gun, if you're an advocate for the Second Amendment, if you believe in being ready at all times, you may or may not need to hear this podcast. But if you're somebody that's always been a little bit left-leaning, and left-leaning, why do I say left-leaning? Because you're more anti-gun, you're more not really worried about the southern border. Well, this is the time to actually be worried. Not for political reasons, but for the literal meaning of you need to be worried. We cannot vet people that come into our country. We cannot vet them. It's impossible to vet every single person, and they're coming in thousands. And we're talking a 900% increase just in Chinese immigrants. Not to mention other countries and other continents. So Africa with Senegal, there's a lot of people coming in from Senegal. There's people coming in from Venezuela. There's people coming in from Syria. So it makes you think as to why the spike. Why is there such a spike? Now, I'm not trying to make this about a border issue, but it really does bring into question why everything's been going the way it is. If we really pay attention to what happened in Israel, and again, you may be for Israel, you may not be for Israel, but the fact remains that what happened in Israel is pretty scary due to the fact that they do have a very advanced border wall. Here in the United States, we have parts of a wall. We have parts of the border that are protected and other parts that are unprotected. But because of that, we have to always think about the possibilities. Who's coming in? Why are they coming in? It's not just good people that are coming in, but it's bad people. And I beg to differ that, I think there's a lot more bad people than there is good people. For the same reason that I think there's something going on to ensure that our adversaries have a plan in place to take us out. What does that look like right now? We don't know. When can it happen? No idea. But will it happen? I think it's only a matter of when rather than if. So, another thing I really want to address is that, and I know this is difficult for some people to hear, but because it kind of has a stigma of being related to Trump, there is a lot of fake news out there. There's a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of media outlets that are biased to one direction. We have to really, really understand where our source of information comes from, because right now we have too much information. When you have too much information, it's very difficult to filter through what's real and what's fake. So when you have too much information and you don't know what's true, people tend to cater or side with the area that suits their beliefs, whether it's real or not. One of the things that I've always tried to do for myself, me being a former military and combat veteran, also a former law enforcement officer, not that everybody likes military or law enforcement officers for that matter, but I'd like to believe that they are a little bit more informed as to what's going on around the world. So I draw on my friends. I look towards my friends, my ex-co-workers, people that I know I can trust, and I say, hey man, what's going on in the world? What do you think our posture is? What do you think we should do? Should I be worried? Should my family be worried? And when you hear people that have been on the front lines or are still on the front lines, whether in the military, law enforcement officers, and they say, brother, you need to get ready. You need to get your stuff ready. It's pretty scary out here. You know what I do? I listen. I don't make it about politics at that point. I make it about survival. Being prepared, being ready. And it doesn't even have to be too much. It doesn't have to be, I have to have a stockpile of ammunition or a stockpile full of food or 10,000 gallons of water or fuel. It just means I have to have a plan with my family, a sit down with my family, that being my kids, my parents, my girlfriend, whoever the case, and just have a plan. And say, for example, one of the things I talked to my dad about was, hey dad, we need to learn how to shoot. And by we, I mean you. And I know you're used to your Winchesters and your old school Mauser rifles from Mexico that you use while hunting, but I want you to learn how to use an AR. I want you to learn how to use an AK. I want you to learn how to use a handgun. I want you to actually know how to aim, acquire sight picture, how to load, unload, clear, and correct the malfunction. I did it with my mom just the other day. Actually, yesterday. Wow. Yesterday, my mom shot some rounds with our AR-15 rifle, which is something extremely rare, but she understands the importance of being ready. She knows that everything, how it's going on, how dangerous it is, and that if her grandkids need her, for her to protect them, she's going to be ready. She knows that if it's called upon her to defend her husband or myself, either because we're incapacitated, unable to do anything, that she needs to know how to use a firearm. Same thing with my 13-year-old daughter. Teaching her the basics of marksmanship, teaching her the basics of how to unload, load, reload, clear, fire the firearm. I know that some people think it's irresponsible or it's scary, but it's education. You do no less when you're teaching somebody, a kid, about making smart decisions when having sexual relationships. You teach them about protection. You teach them about condoms. You teach them about diseases. It's the same thing I'm teaching my family, but with firearms. Concept of the condom. Rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. It's really that simple. Another thing, a big thing that we have to have when getting ready to be prepared is know how to use a tourniquet. You can get tourniquets at an army surplus. You could get them on Amazon. You could probably get them online anywhere, really. And it's a simple military style tourniquet. With that tourniquet, you need to be able to learn how to use it, where to apply it, how hard does it have to be tightened, how long can it be tightened, what do you have to do, why do you have to leave it on, how do you know that you stop the bleeding, how many do I keep? Do I keep one in my car? Do I keep one in my house? Do I keep one on my person? So just learning basic first aid, learning how to do CPR, how to apply a combat gauze on a wound, a sucking chest wound, how to stop bleeding. All of these are important things to learn. And you don't even have to know them for a terrorist attack. You don't have to know them for any kind of tyrannical takeover. You never know. It might even help you if you get into a car accident and the person that's either with you or in the other car loses a limb. Now you have to be ready to be able to help that person or help yourself. Being preparedness is not about being ready for a zombie apocalypse. It's about knowing what to do and having some resources to be able to confront what you're confronted with. I was listening to a podcast today, and the gentleman there, I believe his name is Mike. I don't remember his name. Anyway, he's a special forces operator, and he said, could you survive 72 hours with whatever's in your truck or in your car right now? If something was to happen on your way to work and you were forced to have to protect yourself or survive or go to a safe location, would you be able to survive with whatever's in your vehicle around you? Do you have some water? Do you have a first aid kit? Do you have a firearm? Do you have a blanket? These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Do you have a flashlight? These are things you could buy at the Dollar General, $10, $20. You get a $1 flashlight, $5 multi-tool, a little first aid kit, a blanket from your house that you don't use. Just leave them in your car. Leave them in your car. Every morning, make it a habit to get a big jug of water. We're talking a gallon of water, 2 gallons of water, and just putting it in your car. It's important to know these things. Again, to go back to the border issue, it's a very real possibility. When you have service members, border patrol agents, veterans, combat veterans, law enforcement officers that are shouting into their screens, everybody make sure you have a firearm. Make sure you know how to protect yourself. Make sure you know what to do. Have a plan with your family. When county officials, when sheriffs are saying, have a plan for your family, you would rather listen to somebody else in some media outlet saying, don't worry about it. It's nothing's going to happen. They're just people that are trying to find work. That's the wrong answer, people, and you guys know it. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's not a pig. Being prepared. Do not be scared of these things. That thing right there as it sits on my wall, this AK-47, is not going to do anything to me. It's not going to do anything to my family. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's just an object. At this point, this one's just a decoration. So, why fear something? Why would somebody fear something? People fear what they don't know. People fear what they can't control. So how do you solve that? You get to know it and you learn how to control it. I know this is kind of a cheesy line, but this is literally our gun control. And as cheesy as that sounds, it's very true. Because I know my way around a firearm. I know how to... It's a part of my daily life. When something becomes a part of your daily life, it's like an extra limb. There's no fear to use your arms. There's no fear to use your fingers, right? So why would you be afraid to use a firearm when you train with it? You use it either for survival, for hunting, for home protection, for everyday carry, if you have a handgun. It's all about training. It's about educating your kids how to use it correctly and losing fear of what you don't know. Politics aside, right? Politics is a big barrier right now for people to comprehend or grasp onto information, because we come in with our biases, and it's really hard to change somebody's mind. It's really hard to be able to convince somebody that things are just not right. It's really hard to get across to people because people are just goddamn stubborn. But when you care about your family, if you really do care about your family and the survival of your country, this country, if you really care about what you're going to do to make sure that their future is secure, so that they have a country they can call home, you have to be ready. You cannot depend on law enforcement. In a terrorist situation, an act of terrorism, officers are going to be so busy, they're not going to get in time to your home, if they even get to your home at all. Service members, police officers, they are for ready to an extent for themselves, but don't depend on them to come protect you. Don't depend on them to come and safeguard your home. If there's a squad or a platoon size of terrorists terrorizing all of your city, they're just going to be too busy. It's super important to put aside biases, to put aside religious beliefs, to put aside politics, and simply understand the basic animalistic instinct of survival. Knowing that when it comes to war or when it comes to terrorism, people don't have time to ask you, hey, what do you believe in? If a terrorist comes to your house or invades our country, they're not gonna stop and say, hey, before I do something to you, just let me know, do you believe in Islam? Or do you believe in whatever religion? Or what do you think about this? If you give me the right answer, I won't do anything. That's not reality. These people are going to go through and just, without discriminating. And what I did there for the people that are hearing me on their cars is finger guns. It's something we really have to think about it. And we really have to think about it hard. The world is a big chess game right now. Geopolitics is crazy. Nobody has money because of inflation. Our border is unsecured. We are divided in half. Half our country hates the other half, sadly enough. We have terrorists shooting propaganda through the airwaves and cyber warfare. Social media is bombarded with sympathizers for terrorism, which is ridiculous, but that's the world we live in. So the only thing you can do, if you can't be a fighter, if you can't be a soldier, if you can't be a person that's out there on the front lines, at the very least, you can protect your household and take away the burden from somebody else. Take away the burden from another law enforcement officer. Take the burden away from a soldier. If something was to happen in my house today, and officers came and asked me, hey, do you need help? I'd be like, no, I'm fine, officer. You can go handle something more dangerous or more important. I cannot stress enough how important this is. For one, I love this country. I love the United States. And even though my family, well, my dad came here illegally, even he says a border wall is needed. And again, I'm not going to make this about a border, but I am bringing it up again because of what happened in Israel. The times are not the same. The times of our fathers are not the same. The times when they used to cross and there was maybe a little bit of one or two people coming in and maybe one or two shipments of drugs coming in. Not anymore, people. Now it's sophisticated. Coyotes, cartels, drugs coming in by tons and tons. Terrorists coming in. Males, military age males coming in with no vetting at all. Spreading out to different cities, to Chicago, to New York, to California, to Texas. Cities and states, that is. And nobody has a record of where they're at, where they're going, who they're meeting with, who they're staying with, what their purpose is, what's their purpose, right? And you think it's not important to be ready? You think it's not important to put pressure on our government and tell them to please stop putting restrictions on our Second Amendment? You think it's not important to tell our media stop being biased or start being playing into the narrative of terrorists and spreading propaganda that causes division within our country, which in turn causes terrorist acts because people are running off emotion and not logic, and they decide to go burn a building down or flip over a car or loot a house or a business. We have to demand this from our government. We have to tell them stop messing with our rights, stop messing with our information, stop messing with our ideologies, stop twisting the narratives. As Americans, we have an inherent responsibility to always fight tyranny, whatever that means. And it doesn't mean quote unquote, because we all have our opinion on January 6th. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we have to be able to put pressure on our government to be for the people. A government by the people, for the people. So, to kind of bring this to a close, and I know I kind of shotgun blasted you with a bunch of information and topics all at once. Be prepared, people. Take a course. Learn how to do first aid. Learn how to apply a tourniquet. Get some at an army surplus store. Put some medical stuff in your car. Make sure your car's always topped off with fuel. Sit down with your family and have a plan. If you're anti-gun, maybe consider having a gun. 2, if you don't have a concealed carry, have a concealed carry. If they allow you to do open carry, well then, open carry. Do something. Be prepared. A little bit goes a long ways. A little bit goes a long ways. Stop hating on each other. Stop believing everything you see on the internet. Stop believing everything you see on TikTok. Stop trying to get likes just because you're sympathizing with a group of people. How about stand up for truth, right, morality? Have honor and integrity. Teach love, but also teach justice. Be ready, people. Be ready. Well, if you tuned into this podcast, hey, I appreciate it. My name's Jesus Barron. This is Lead and Bacon Podcast. Now, I'm going to be posting this on YouTube. I'm also going to be posting a preview on TikTok. Hopefully leads me to viewers on YouTube because I want people to be able to hear this message. I'll also be posting this on Instagram. Lead and Bacon Podcast on Instagram. Lead and Bacon on TikTok. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, this is Lead and Bacon Podcast. Hey, I appreciate it. Be safe. Have a plan. God bless. Take care of it.